I shouldn't admit this out loud, but when I first heard the words, I joked about my husband's looks. Now another woman calls him handsome, echo in my head. I thought about her. About the way she said it. Almost laughing, but with something sharp tucked behind her teeth. That's how she always speaks, like she's giving you only half the truth, daring you to fill in the rest. I work afternoons at Foster's Repair, a place that smells like oil and coffee gone cold. People wander in with things that won't start, won't close, won't shine like they used to. She came in with something simple, a broken lamp. Brass base, frayed cord. Easy job. Except nothing felt easy once she stepped inside. She didn't belong to the noise of clattering tools or the flicker of fluorescent lights. She carried herself like someone used to being looked at, but not in the way most women are. Not for youth, not for polish. For presence. Her voice was lower than I expected, like a late song on the radio, the kind that fills the quiet without asking permission. "I'm told you can fix anything," she said, setting the lamp down gently, as if it might bruise. I wiped my hands on a rag, suddenly aware of the grease on my skin, the scuffs on my shirt. "Depends. Some things don't want fixing." Her mouth curved, half a smile, half something else. That's what I was afraid of. I should have asked about the lamp, the wiring, the details. But instead, I was watching her fingers trace the rim of the brass base, absent-minded, like she was touching something alive. I looked too long. She noticed. She didn't call me out on it. She just met my eyes, steady, for a second too long, until I had to break away, pretending to check the cord. My chest felt too tight for no reason I could name. I asked if she wanted it back today, or if she could wait. She said, "I've waited long enough." Take your time. It didn't make sense, but it landed heavy. Like she wasn't just talking about the lamp. The shop was too quiet then. No other customers, no clatter. Even the radio in the corner had fizzled into static. She leaned against the counter, close enough that I caught the faintest scent of something warm. Vanilla, maybe, or old wood polished clean. It wrapped around me, and I forgot what I was supposed to be doing. She filled the silence herself, words spilling in a rhythm that was more for her than for me. "My husband thinks it's silly, bringing in things like this. Says it's cheaper to buy new. He doesn't get it. Sometimes it's not about new. It's about keeping what you have." I nodded, though my throat felt dry. She wasn't really asking for agreement, just talking into the air between us. And yet, I heard something in it. Regret? Maybe. When she finally turned to go, she tapped her fingers lightly on the counter. A small sound, but it stuck. "Call me when it's ready," she said. I wanted to ask her name again, just to hear how it sounded when she said it. Instead, I only managed, "Sure." And then she was gone, the door swinging shut behind her, leaving the shop feeling emptier than it had before. I stared at the lamp for a long time after, my hand still resting on the frayed cord. I told myself it was just another repair, another customer. But the truth is, there was something in that pause, in the way she looked at me like she wasn't supposed to. And I can't stop replaying it. The second time she came in, she didn't bring a lamp or a clock or anything that actually needed fixing. She just stood in the doorway a moment, brushing her hair back with the kind of distracted movement people make when they're carrying more weight than they want others to see. "Do you also look at coffee machines?" she asked, holding up a dented silver one, the kind you'd see in kitchens that had seen better mornings. "Sure," I said, though the machine in her hands looked beyond saving. "Let's see." She set it down on the counter carefully, as if it might fall apart under her touch. That struck me. Someone else would have dumped it like scrap, but she held it like it mattered. "I could probably just buy a new one," she murmured, almost to herself. "But this one makes the coffee the way I like it." Her eyes flicked up to mine, then away again. She didn't want to be caught in that small admission, and I didn't press it. I started working the screws loose, the machine opening with a groan. She lingered on the other side of the counter, her arms crossed like a shield. Every so often, I caught her fingers tapping against her elbow, restless. "You always this busy?" she asked suddenly. "Not really." I glanced up, but she was looking somewhere past me, at the shelves stacked with forgotten radios and toasters. "People only come when something breaks." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I know the feeling." Something in her voice thinned there, and for a second, she wasn't the composed, self-possessed woman from before. She looked tired, not in the way of late nights or missed sleep, but in a way that went deeper. Lines around her mouth softened when she thought no one was watching. I wanted to ask if she was okay, but that wasn't my place. Instead, I noticed how she smoothed her thumb over the counter's edge, like she needed the grounding. "You're quiet," she said after a while, eyes landing on me. "Maybe you just talk enough for both of us." I meant it lightly, but the silence that followed felt heavier than I expected. She tilted her head, studying me with that unreadable calm of hers. Then, for just a second, something cracked through. Her shoulders dropped, her eyes softened. Vulnerability, raw and fleeting. But then she straightened again, brushing invisible dust from her sleeve. "Well, let me know if it's worth saving," she said, her voice back to steady, practiced ease. I nodded, though my focus wasn't on the machine anymore. It was on the way she'd let her guard slip, if only for a heartbeat. As she reached for the coffee maker, our hands nearly touched. Not quite, just enough for the space between us to hum. And even after she walked out the door, that quiet spark lingered in the air, impossible to shake. The night she stayed longer than usual. The rain had started without warning. Heavy, urgent drops drumming on the roof of the shop, sliding down the glass front like the whole world was leaning in, listening. She stood by the counter, her coat folded over her arm, waiting while I tightened the last screw into the coffee machine. I could feel the storm pressing against the building, making the small space feel even smaller. "You're here late," I said, keeping my voice steady. "So are you." Her tone was even, but her eyes wandered. Over the tools scattered on the bench, the stack of receipts, the half-empty mug of cold tea I hadn't thrown out. Like she was searching for something to say, or maybe trying not to say what she wanted to. The machine finally gave a sputter, a weak hum. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive again. She leaned closer, studying it, her shoulder brushing mine for the briefest second. Not enough to be intentional, not enough to apologize for. But I felt it. "Still works?" she asked, her voice softer than before. "Better than before," I said, though I wasn't talking about the machine. She looked up at me then, really looked, and for a second the storm outside vanished. Her expression carried something unguarded, like a secret trying to slip free. My chest tightened, ready to ask a question I hadn't formed yet. But then her phone rang. The sound shattered the quiet, sharp and unwelcome. She turned away quickly, fumbling in her bag, her voice low as she answered. "I'll be home soon," she said into the receiver. A pause. No, I didn't forget. Her back was to me, but the tension in her shoulders told me enough. She ended the call quickly, sliding the phone back like it had betrayed her. "Sorry," she murmured. I shrugged, pretending not to notice the shift in the air, pretending not to wonder who had called. Husband, maybe, or someone else. Pretending not to care when I clearly did. She smoothed her coat against her arm, not putting it on yet, as if she couldn't quite bring herself to leave. "You ever fix something and realize it wasn't broken the way you thought it was?" I hesitated, the question landing deeper than it should have. "All the time." For a moment, neither of us moved. The lamplight flickered against the rain-streaked window, her face half in shadow, half in gold. If I had reached out then, just an inch more, I could have touched her hand resting on the counter. I didn't. I held myself still, the weight of what almost happened pressing harder than the storm outside. She slipped her coat on finally, her expression calm again, practiced. "Thank you for staying late," she said. I only nodded, watching her disappear into the rain, knowing I'd replay that near touch in my head long after. It wasn't planned. She came in near closing, no broken machine, no excuse in her hands. Just herself, damp from the drizzle outside, hair clinging in darker strands at her temples. "You're still here," she said softly, like she was surprised by me and herself at the same time. Where else would I be? I tried for a lightness I didn't feel. The shop was too quiet, shelves heavy with shadows. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked slowly, fingertips brushing over a stack of radios, a row of clocks that hadn't ticked in years. I watched her like I always did. Careful, as if staring too openly would break something fragile. Finally, she turned. "You know this isn't normal." The words landed heavy, sharper than any tool I'd ever handled. I set the wrench down, my palms suddenly restless. "What isn't this?" She motioned vaguely between us. The counter, the air, the silence so thick it hummed. "I shouldn't be here this much." I swallowed, searching for an answer that wouldn't sound like a confession. "You're a customer." She gave a quiet, almost broken laugh. "Don't make it smaller than it is." And then nothing. No movement. No sound except the faint drip of rain from her coat onto the floor. I thought if I spoke too quickly, I'd ruin whatever thin thread held us in this suspended moment. She leaned against the counter, her arms folded, but her eyes were bare, tired, searching, waiting. "I don't even know what I'm doing anymore," she whispered. I didn't move closer, though every muscle wanted to. "Maybe you just needed somewhere to be." Her gaze lingered on me, long, unblinking, almost unbearable. "And what about you? Why do you let me stay?" I couldn't answer fast enough. The truth pressed against my ribs, but I held it back. Instead, I gave a half shrug. "Maybe I don't mind the company." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but no words came. Just silence stretching between us, thick with everything unspoken. We stood there, trapped in a standoff neither of us had chosen, and yet we couldn't step out of it. Her voice dropped, quiet as a secret. "You know, if I keep coming back, it won't end well for either of us." I met her stare then, unable to look away. "I know." She held my gaze a moment longer, her jaw tightening, her breath uneven. And then, softer than I thought possible, she said the line that hollowed me out. "Then why can't I stay away?" The shop was supposed to close an hour ago. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly, each second announcing that she was still here, that I hadn't found the nerve to ask why. She sat on the stool by the counter, her coat draped across her lap, not making any move to leave. I pretended to clean my tools, though I'd already put them away twice. The silence between us had weight, thicker than words, heavier than the rain pressing against the windows. Finally, she spoke. Not loud, not sharp, just enough to cut through everything. "What are we doing?" Her voice carried no accusation, no plan, just confusion. A question asked into the air, though her eyes never left mine. I froze, rag still in my hands. "I don't know." She gave a faint smile that wasn't a smile at all. "You're too young to not know. And you're too certain to ask." The words slipped out before I could stop them. That broke something in her. Her shoulders dropped, her posture no longer careful. She leaned forward, elbows on the counter, fingers pressing into her temples like she was holding her head together. "I'm not certain about anything anymore," she whispered. I wanted to reach across, to brush her hand, to offer something solid. But my hand stayed clenched at my sides. I didn't trust myself. The silence returned, but it was different now. Not a barrier, an opening. Every second stretched, daring one of us to fill it. She looked up, eyes glassy in the lamplight. "Do you know what it feels like to be invisible in your own life?" I swallowed hard, because I'd never heard her speak like that. Not guarded, not teasing, just stripped down. More than I'd admit. Her laugh was short, sharp, and pained. She turned her face away, staring at the rain-warped glass. For a long time, neither of us moved. When she looked back at me, it wasn't the same gaze she'd carried all those other times. It wasn't careful, wasn't polite. It was raw, desperate, almost pleading. "If anyone saw me here like this," she said, her voice trembling just once, "they wouldn't recognize me." I took a breath, slow, steady, like I could hold the world still. "I don't think I'd want them to." Her lips parted as though she might answer, but no sound came. Just that silence again, wrapping tight around us until the ticking clock felt like a hammer in my chest. And then she gave me the line that split me open, soft, broken, like she hadn't meant to let it escape. "I don't know who I am when I'm with you." The shop was quieter than usual that evening. No radio, no customers, just the hum of the overhead lights and the faint sound of traffic outside. She came in carrying nothing this time. No lamp, no coffee machine, no excuse. Just herself. I didn't ask why. I only poured her some of the stale coffee sitting in the back, setting the chipped mug in front of her like we'd done this 100 times before. She wrapped her hands around it, though she didn't drink. Her fingers tightened, loosened, tightened again. That restless rhythm told me something was building. "You remind me of someone," she said suddenly. Her voice was low, steady, but it pulled all the air out of the room. I swallowed. "Who?" She didn't answer right away. She stared at the surface of the coffee, as if it might give her permission. "My brother." The word hit harder than I expected. Not what I'd braced for. "He died when I was your age," she continued, eyes still fixed on the cup. "Accident. One day he was there. The next," she stopped herself, jaw tight, a muscle ticking in her cheek. The silence between us swelled. I wanted to ask how, why, what happened, but the way her shoulders stiffened told me not to. Instead, I just said, "I'm sorry." She finally looked up, and for the first time since I'd known her, her eyes weren't guarded. They were glassy, unhidden. "You move like him. The way you look at people, like you're always trying to read the parts they don't say. Even the way you stand when you're unsure of yourself. I see him in all of it." Her words pressed against me, heavier than any confession of love could have been. I didn't know what to do with my hands. They hovered near the counter. "Useless. Is that why you keep coming back?" I asked, quieter than I meant. She exhaled, shaky. "Maybe. Or maybe it's because when I'm here, I don't feel like everything else is closing in." I let that sit. I didn't push. I didn't dare. The lights buzzed above us, the only sound breaking the fragile air. Her fingers finally lifted from the mug, and she pressed her palm flat against the counter. Close, so close to mine. Not touching. Not quite. Her eyes lingered on that space, the breath between us, the almost contact that wasn't allowed to happen. And then, just as quickly, she pulled back, wrapping her arms around herself. But before she left, she gave me a line I knew would stay lodged in my chest. "Sometimes I wonder if I keep seeing him, or if I've just been seeing you." The shop was half lit, the backlight buzzing faintly, everything washed in amber. She came without a word, slipping inside as though she belonged here more than anywhere else. I didn't ask why. By now I knew better. We didn't pretend to busy ourselves with broken things. No lamps, no clocks, no machines tonight. Just two people, standing on either side of a counter that had become something more than wood and bolts. It had become the line we drew, the line we never crossed. Until now. She rested her palms flat on the counter, fingers splayed. I mirrored her without thinking, my hands inches from hers. The silence was thick, but not unbearable. It carried everything we'd refused to say. Finally, she exhaled, the sound fragile. "We can't keep pretending this is nothing." Her voice wasn't steady, but it wasn't breaking either. It was real. I nodded, throat tight. "I know." Her eyes lifted to mine, searching, not for answers, just recognition. For proof she wasn't alone in the confusion. "You're too young," she whispered, almost as if to herself. "And you're too careful," I said, my voice low, steadying us both. Something shifted in her then, her shoulders, her mouth, her eyes. Like she was done fighting a battle she hadn't chosen. We didn't move quickly. No rush, no sudden collapse. Just the slow gravity of inevitability pulling us closer. She walked around the counter, steps quiet, deliberate, until she was standing beside me. I could feel the warmth of her arm brushing mine, both of us rigid in the closeness. Her breath caught, but she didn't step back. "If anyone knew, they don't have to," I said. That was the end of words. We let silence take over, but this silence was different, no longer sharp with questions. It was soft, heavy, almost tender. My hand trembled once before I let it fall, grazing hers on the workbench. She didn't move away. Instead, she let her fingers tilt just enough so that they fit against mine, not holding, not grasping, just there. Present. We stood like that for a long while. No declarations, no promises. Just two people who had stumbled into something neither of us asked for, but both of us recognized. When she finally leaned, it wasn't for a kiss. It was her forehead, resting gently against mine, eyes closed, breath uneven. I closed mine too, the world narrowing to that single point of contact. And in that fragile stillness, I knew the truth. We had crossed a line without ever needing to say it. The clock ticked on, rain still pressed against the windows, life still waiting outside. But in that moment, quiet, final, unshakable, we were simply there. Together. I think about those nights more often than I admit. The hum of the lights in the shop, the rain pressing against the glass, the silence that felt fuller than any words we could have spoken. Back then, I thought love had to be loud to matter, something declared, shouted, proven. But what I found with her was quieter. It lived in the pauses, the glances, the way our hands hovered close without needing to hold. She never said I love you. I never did either. And maybe that's why it mattered so much. It wasn't about naming it. It was about knowing it existed, even if it had nowhere to go. She taught me that people are layered in ways we rarely see. That regret can sit inside someone's eyes for years, but so can longing. That sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't crossing a line. It's standing so close to it, day after day, pretending you don't notice. I can't tell you where she is now. We didn't end in flames or promises. We ended the way quiet things do, with one last look that carried everything we couldn't say, and a silence that spoke for both of us. But I walked away changed. I learned that love doesn't always mean having. Sometimes it's just knowing you could have, and letting that be enough. When I see her in my mind, she's always in that half-light. Coat draped over her arm, eyes steady, voice softer than she wanted it to be. She made me braver, not in chasing her, but in finally seeing myself. And maybe that's the point. Love isn't always about forever. Sometimes it's about the moment someone shows you a version of yourself you didn't realize was possible. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?